welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. South Korea's trade minister met with U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer in Washington to discuss the trade agenda ahead of President Yi's summit with his American counterpart Donald Trump. Billionaire businessman and philanthropist Bill Gates met with President Lee Jae-myung in Seoul and discussed solutions for humanity through nuclear energy and bioinnovation. An arrest warrant has been issued for Chun Sung-bae, a shaman linked to bribery allegations against former First Lady Kim Gon-hee. And former Prime Minister Han Duck-soo also faces a second round of questioning today over allegations that he helped former President Yoon's efforts to impose martial law in December. As Seoul and Washington gear up for a summit between their leaders, South Korea's trade minister held talks with a senior U.S. trade official. This comes as more top officials from Seoul are on their way to Washington to finalize key discussions. Our Park Chun-an starts us off.
Ahead of the summit between South Korea's President Lee Jae-myung and U.S. President Donald Trump in Washington, D.C. on Monday, Trade Minister Yo Han-gu reportedly met with U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer on Thursday. The two sides are expected to have discussed the trade agenda for the presidential summit. The meeting comes less than a month after South Korea and the U.S. agreed on a trade and investment package deal on July 30th. It also follows last month's framework agreement, with both sides now focusing on specifics. Meanwhile, South Korea's Industry Minister Kim Jong-wan is also set to arrive in Washington on Friday to meet U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and Energy Secretary Chris Wright. The talks, expected to occur on the same day due to a tight schedule, will likely cover industrial cooperation, which includes shipbuilding, semiconductors, batteries, and nuclear energy. Foreign Minister Cho Hyun is set to arrive in Washington on Thursday evening. Cho, who was initially scheduled to travel to Tokyo for President Yi's summit with Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, reportedly canceled his trip at the last minute and headed to the U.S. instead. Addressing concerns that there may be changes to the agenda or even the summit schedule, Foreign Ministry official told reporters on Thursday that Cho's trip to Washington is to make final arrangements given the significance of the summit. Park Chun-an, Arirang News.
So as we just heard, a busy week ahead for President Yi as he is set to visit Japan and the United States for the first time since taking office. Now, before heading to Washington, Yi is set to meet Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba in Tokyo on Saturday. For more on what to expect at the meeting between the leaders of South Korea and Japan, we're joined by Dr. Kim Mi-kyung, senior researcher at Gyeongsang National University. Dr. Kim, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
So President Yi will be traveling to Tokyo tomorrow to meet with the Japanese Prime Minister Ishiba, and this week's meeting comes as this year marks the 80th anniversary of Korea's liberation from Japan's colonial rule and also the 60th anniversary of the normalization of bilateral ties between Seoul and Tokyo. So what might be on the agenda when the two leaders meet?
Oh, I can think of basically 4 following items. Firstly, on economic and trade cooperation. Both countries are facing trade uncertainties from the Trump administration's steep tariffs, and they are likely to focus primarily on technology and supply chains. The summit might explore more opportunities for the enhancement of bilateral cooperation in the areas of tourism, trade, and investment as well. Secondly, on security coordination. Both countries are dealing with security threats from North Korea's growing ties with Russia, making regional security cooperation a priority. Thirdly, both leaders are likely to cooperate with each other to prepare for Lee-Trump summit meeting. Lee's meeting with Ishiba is clearly intended to prepare for the tough challenge of the summit with Trump, where Lee could seek negotiation tips from Ishiba, who has already navigated relationships with the Trump administration over tariff issues. And finally, trilateral cooperation. The visit aims at strengthening bilateral relations and reinforcing trilateral cooperation with Washington, while the meeting could help dispel U.S. concerns by showing how close Seoul and Tokyo are despite their historical disputes.
I see, and it's the first time in 2 years that a South Korean president is visiting Japan, and it's unusual for a new Korean leader to meet the Japanese prime minister first before meeting the U.S. president. You just mentioned that he could seek some tips from Ishiba. Could you tell us more about the significance of this trip and what it says about the administration's policy towards Japan?
Oh, yes, of course. The timing is very significant as this represents unprecedented decision to visit Japan before the U.S., highlighting the strategic importance both leaders place on Korea-Japan coordination in the current geopolitical environment. I believe this visit represents a remarkable diplomatic shift that reveals several key aspects of Lee administration's policy towards Japan. First, it seems to suggest a transformation in bilateral history-related policy stance. And what do I mean by this? The significance of this trip cannot be overstated. Lee had spoken harshly of Japan in the past, for example, declaring in 2016 that, quote, Japan is an enemy country, end quote. Now, as president, he is taking unprecedented step of visiting Tokyo before Washington, marking a dramatic evolution in his stance. This posture vis-a-vis Japan is consistent with Lee Jae-myung's pragmatic doctrine, where diplomacy cannot be an exception. Lee's Japan policy basically follows a two-pronged strategy. It seeks cooperation on issues of economy and trade, as well as security, while maintaining a principled stance on historical and territorial disputes. This represents what experts call pragmatic, national interest-centered diplomacy that prioritizes strategic needs over historical grievances. President Lee's adoption of this two-track approach by separating historical issues from present and future areas of cooperation appears to ease lingering Japanese doubt, demonstrating his willingness to compartmentalize contentious issues for broader strategic gains. Lee's unprecedented decision to visit Japan before the United States allows the two Asian neighbors and allies of the U.S. to tightly coordinate their response to Trump administration. Leaders Lee and Ishiba emphasized overlapping concerns about the global turmoil as their primary security partner. In other words, the U.S. turns inward. The upcoming Japan visit seems to reflect Lee's broader foreign policy transformation.
I see. I guess we'll have to see how the summit plays out this week. All right, Dr. Kim, thank you so much for your insight today. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
The founder of Microsoft and now chairman of the Gates Foundation, Bill Gates, is here in Seoul to discuss solutions for humanity through nuclear energy and innovative tech in collaboration with South Korea. Our Oh Soo-young has this report.
Seeking windows to resolve growing challenges faced by humanity. Nuclear power and bioinnovation topped the discussion between President Lee Jae-myung and tech mogul turned philanthropist Bill Gates. On Thursday, the founder of Microsoft and now chairman of the Gates Foundation paid a visit to the presidential office in Seoul. President Lee commended Gates for his contributions to the world through the Windows operating system, as well as global health and development.
지구와 지구인 전체를 위한 그런 공공적 활동에 대해서 경의를 표하고 우리 대한민국 정부도 함께할 방법을 최대한 찾아보겠습니다.
Gates, meanwhile, noted South Korea's transition from a recipient to a donor of foreign aid, highlighting its role and innovation in advancing global development, such as in tackling child mortality through Korea's bioscience products.
The world has changed a lot, whether it's the geopolitics or the technology of AI. And so you have a huge opportunity to re-examine some of the key strategies and really reinforce the strong role that South Korea plays in solving many of these problems.
He added that while the evolution of artificial intelligence and science brings development and progress, such changes also raise concerns. He pointed to rising healthcare costs in low-income countries, stressing that multinational support is critical. Gates later said at a separate event there could also be partnerships between health agencies and North Korea as a low-income country in the fields of vaccines too, but noted Pyongyang has decided against such cooperation. Addressing the growing demand for power in advanced industries such as AI and semiconductors, Gates suggested small modular reactors could be an effective solution. President Lee expressed Korea's interest in constructing next-generation nuclear power plants. He said many local firms have been developing small reactors and their presence in the global market is steadily increasing. Korea's second-largest conglomerate, SK, has invested $250 million into TerraPower, an SMR firm founded by Gates. TerraPower is also partnering with the Korean government to develop a global supply chain for advanced nuclear technologies. Visiting Korea for the first time in 3 years, Gates on Thursday also met with local press and politicians at the National Assembly. He said the Gates Foundation is planning to open an office in Korea, citing his frequent interactions with the country's authorities and businesses. He added he always enjoys coming to Korea and hopes to visit every 2 or 3 years. Oh Seong, Arirang News.
Shifting gears, the Seoul Central District Court on Thursday issued an arrest warrant for Jeon Sung-bae, a shaman linked to bribery allegations against former First Lady Kim Gun-hee. The court cited a high risk that it could destroy evidence. The decision also comes just 2 days after a special counsel team led by Min Jun-gi filed for his arrest on charges of bribery and violation of political funding laws. Meanwhile, former Prime Minister Han Duck-soo has been summoned by a special counsel team led by Cho Eun-seok for a second round of questioning on Friday. That's part of the investigation into former President Yoon Suk-yeol's failed attempt to declare martial law. The council team says it will determine whether to seek an arrest warrant for Han following the session. On the economic front, the U.S. Federal Reserve's Jackson Hole Symposium has now kicked off, with much attention on Chairman Jerome Powell's keynote speech. Our correspondent Moon Ji-young has more.
Central bankers from around the world have convened in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, for the Federal Reserve's annual conference. All eyes are on Fed Chair Jerome Powell, slated to deliver a speech this morning local time. His address comes amidst political pressure from U.S. President Donald Trump, who continues to push for interest rate cuts. Market expectations are divided on what Chairman Powell will signal. This is due to the conflicting signals emanating from the crucial economic indicators, employment and inflation data. Employment indicators have begun to show signs of stress. U.S. employment growth in July proved weaker than anticipated. U.S. non-farm payrolls increased by 73,000 jobs in July, following a downwardly revised 14,000 increase in June, the fewest gains in nearly 5 years. Weakening employment data suggests a potential economic downturn, increasing the impetus for rate cuts.
We do expect the Federal Reserve to favor that side of the mandate. So, focusing more on the employment side versus the inflation side. And if we do see incremental weakening in labor market conditions in the upcoming weeks, I think Chair Powell wants to give himself a route to start to resume those interest rate cuts if that's indeed what happens with the data looking forward.
Conversely, the inflation picture remains unstable. The U.S. Producer Price Index for July surged by 0.9%, exceeding the forecasted 0.2% increase and the largest monthly increase since June 2022. This inflationary pressure hinders prospects for rate cuts. Meanwhile, minutes from the Fed's July session indicate that most policymakers largely agreed on maintaining the interest rate at 4.25% to 4.5%, primarily citing heightened inflation risks stemming from President Trump's tariff policies. Notably, however, two members of the Fed committee dissented from this status quo, voting instead for a 25 basis point rate cut at the last policy meeting on July 29th and 30th. This marks the first time since 1993 that more than one Fed governor has voted against a rate decision. 문지영, Arirang News.
K-pop Demon Hunters director Maggie Kang is back in Korea, the home of the genre that inspired her global hit animation. Our Park Gun-woo sat down with the star director to talk about her journey and what may come next.
Homecoming Golden. After shaking the world with K-pop Demon Hunters, director Maggie Kang has returned to Korea, the home of K-pop.
Well, every time I come to Seoul, I feel like I'm home. So when the plane touches down, I just think to myself, oh, I'm home now.
Having spent lots of summers in Seoul as a young girl, Kang says her back-and-forth life between Korea and abroad became a deep source of inspiration.
All the summers I spent in Seoul, I was here. I was experiencing it firsthand. I was feeling everything. I was smelling the smells. And that memory just kind of stays with you. And, you know, it almost becomes real. It's like you're reliving your memories. And that paired with all the kind of pop culture and references that I learned from Western culture.
Back then, her love for K-pop was often dismissed by her friends abroad. But now she feels a massive shift to how K-culture is embraced in the West, making her proud to be a Korean.
Well, when I was a little bit more insecure, I hid it from people. But the older I got, I knew that I've always just had this like strong Korean pride, so it always had stayed with me. And then to see Korean culture just be more, I don't know, like just loved and people wanting more of it, I've just seen that gradually happen where now it's kind of unavoidable. You go to a fast food restaurant and there's like a gochujang flavor of chicken wings, and it's just natural. It's just like kind of completely accepted into mainstream, and that's just amazing to me. You know?
Seeing the rise of K-pop's popularity, Kang says she wanted the film to reflect that connection with fans, not tied to just one idol group.
We opened up kind of a reference board to our entire crew, and by the time that we got into designing these characters and figuring them out, literally everybody was on there. You know, we took elements of this idol or this group, and so it is really a mix. You know, when they see Huntrix, they think, I'm a fan of this group, and so for me, Huntrix is this group. I just wanted to make a film for every K-pop fan to enjoy in their own way.
The movie took around 7 years to make, leaving a question. How does she manage to stay relevant and trendy?
It's really about the story and really staying true to what the audience is going to connect with, and that's really the emotional story of the characters and the message of the film. And I think from the very beginning that was really set. That was our kind of North Star. It was all a culmination of everybody's like favorite things.
She even shared her favorite scene that much effort was put into.
Well, all of the scenes are like my children, and I can't really say that any of them were easy. One of the scenes that I'm most proud of is the very opening scene where we see the old-time original hunters, and we see Korean culture from, like, you know, the Joseon era to modern day. It's such a short moment, but for me, being someone who's Korean, it was just such an emotional feeling to like see our tradition just on screen.
With global fans still excited about the movie, Kang gave us a sneak peek of a potential sequel.
After spending so many years making this film, there's a lot of ideas that didn't make it in. So there's different types of demons that we didn't get to feature. So I would love to feature new demons, you know, that are different visually and and different types of music. And I think there's a lot of backstories that we can flesh out and give the fans a little bit, more information on.
Can you give us a message for all the roomies outside watching that are struggling for finding their dreams and trying to pursue their career that they want?
Yeah, don't be scared. Stay true to yourself. And if you feel scared, you're probably doing something right, because it means that it hasn't been done. And it means that it's coming from somewhere deep inside of you. And I think once you create any work of art or put anything out there that's a part of yourself, that's what people want to see. That's what people connect to the most.
At the end of the day, Kang stressed the film carries one true message: don't be scared of who you are. Echoing the lyrics of K-pop Demon Hunters' theme song, Golden. I'm done hiding. Now I'm shining like I'm born to be. 박건우, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Choi Ji-hee, and this is The World Now. Starting in Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has announced that Israel will begin ceasefire negotiations aimed at releasing all hostages and ending the Gaza war on conditions acceptable to Israel. Addressing Israeli commanders and troops in Gaza on Thursday, Prime Minister Netanyahu confirmed the authorization for an expansion of military operations aimed at seizing Gaza City. He also announced the initiation of new immediate ceasefire negotiations with Hamas. Netanyahu said these negotiations aim to achieve an end to the war and the release of all our hostages, but he insisted that the terms must be acceptable to Israel. While Hamas has proposed a 60-day ceasefire along with a prisoner exchange, Israel's conditions remain the complete disarmament of Hamas and the end of its military control over Gaza. Netanyahu highlighted a dual-track strategy of both military pressure and diplomatic dialogue, evidenced by the mobilization of 60,000 reservists and the planned ground offensive to seize Gaza City. The Israeli military has warned medical officials and international organizations to prepare for evacuation of nearly 1 million residents of Gaza City ahead of the new ground operations. In Italy, a Ukrainian man has been arrested in connection with the 2022 Nord Stream pipeline explosions. Italian police arrested Serhiy K., a 49-year-old Ukrainian, at a holiday bungalow near Rimini in central Italy in the early hours of Thursday. The arrest was executed under a warrant issued by German prosecutors. They accused Serhiy K. of being one of the masterminds of the sabotage in 2022 of the Nord Stream pipelines that carry energy under the Baltic Sea from Russia to Germany. The operation to destroy the pipelines was carried out from a yacht with a team that included divers and support operatives. This is the first arrest in a case that Swedish and Danish authorities had closed in 2024 without resolution. German Justice Minister Stephanie Hübig commended the operation and reaffirmed Germany's commitment to the rule of law, distancing this case from its unwavering support for Ukraine. Egypt has successfully retrieved a collection of 2,000-year-old artifacts from the seabed of Abu Qir Bay off the coast of Alexandria. The find includes a headless statue, a sphinx, Roman coins, and a carved priestly figure, which archaeological evidence suggests could be remains from an extension of the ancient city of Canopus. The site also revealed limestone building remains, including residential structures and places of worship. Egypt's Antiquities Minister Sharif Fatih emphasized that the lifting operation followed a 2001 UNESCO agreement, raising only select artifacts to preserve the broader underwater heritage.
My weather report seems to be a repeat of the last few days. More heat and scattered showers. It seems the heat has no plans to let up. More regions are now under heat wave warnings, with overnight temperatures staying above 25 degrees Celsius in most parts. Skies will be clear nationwide with on and off cloud cover. And from the afternoon into the evening, passing showers will move across the southern parts of Korea with 5 to 60 millimeters in the forecast, along with thunderstorms. And this afternoon, Seoul, Gwangju, and Busan will be getting up to 33 degrees Celsius. Daegu, Gyeongju will be hotter this afternoon. UV rays will be strong to very strong throughout the day with that high humidity. Tomorrow is Cheoseo in Korea's traditional seasonal calendar, which usually signals relief from the summer heat. But strong heat will stay longer despite the frequent chances of rain. So please take well care of yourself in this intense heat.
Now that's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.